In this video, we're going to focus on connecting to our MySQL server using PHP so that we can access the user information and append it to our website. Now, I'm going to do a bit of a refresher here on how we can actually set up our web server and stuff again. But just to remind you, we should have a folder called website somewhere on our desktop. And inside of that folder, there should be 2 or 3 files here. In particular, the most important one will be this index.php file where we wrote some PHP code to display some users. What we're going to do first is we're going to create a new PHP file, and that file is going to be used to connect to our database. Now, before we do that, let's set up our web server again. We can do that by again opening up command prompt and then typing in cd desktop/website so that we move into our website's directory, our website folder. And now we just need to use the php CLI command to set up the web server. And just to refresh your memory, it's php-S localhost and then whatever port you want to connect on. I'm going to do 8000. Now we've got our web server set up. We can test it again by going into Google Chrome and just refreshing the local host on port 8000, and we should see our website as it was before. Now what we're going to do is create a new file so that we can connect to our database. Now to do that, open up Notepad++, click on File, New, OK, and we're going to add in some PHP tags, and then just save it. Now I'm going to call this as db.php, and we will refer to this file in any other files that we want to connect to our database within. So this file is going to contain all the information required to connect to our database. Click Save, and now we have our PHP file. Okay, to connect to our database, I've just Googled PHP connect to MySQL, and it's found me the MySQLi connect method. They've given us an example, so let's use it here. We'll just copy it. And all we're going to have to do is change the information within this method. Now, I don't want to call it link. I want to call it DB, just because that's what I'm used to calling my database connection. And you can see the first parameter in this method is the IP address of the MySQL server. This is the local host IP, so that's just referring to our own computer. This is the username that you use to log into your MySQL server. So whatever you selected when you set up MySQL, that's what you'd put in here. Or in other words, whatever you use to log into MySQL Workbench, that's what you would write in here. I think mine's just Daniel. Here you would write your password. I'm going to leave that here for now just as blank, and maybe we'll see a failed connection and it'll give us some reasoning behind it. And then over here you can select the schema or database. So I think we called our schema simple site. And this is basically the same as applying the use simple site command in MySQL. Okay, so that's going to mean that whatever code we write, whatever queries we write inside of here is going to automatically refer to that simple site schema. All right, let's see what happens. So I've made the file. It's here. I'm going to go into my web browser. Now, remember, if I load up localhost, it's automatically going to direct me to the index.php file, but we want to access the db file just to see what happens. So I'll write /db.php, enter, nothing. Let's have a look at command prompt to see if there were any errors. And if you have a look, you can see that it says access denied for user Daniel on localhost. And that was probably because I wrote the wrong password. If I move my connection over, so I hide my password, I'll put in the correct password over here, save it, I'll refresh the page, and you can see that I have no access problems. So it's loading up and connecting to the database with no issues. Alright, so now that we've connected to our database using PHP, we can start trying to figure out how we can write some queries. Now what we'll do is we'll make a separate file, and in that file we'll just test our database. So go back into Notepad++, create a new file, put in some PHP tags, and save it inside of your website folder. I'm going to call this file testdb.php. Now, we don't have to write that connection code again because it already exists within the db.php file. All we need to do is include that document within the current document. So one way to do that is using the include once method. So we write include once and we tell it to include whatever is written inside of that db.php file. Now this is just a really simple examples. Of course there are better ways to do this, but in this basic guide, we'll just stick with include once. So what's going to happen is when this file is compiled and executed, it's going to head over to the db.php file, grab all of the code, basically place it there, execute it, and then we can assume that the db variable now exists because it will be generated within this file at the top here. Alright, so one way we can execute a query is we can just create a variable called SQL and write our query inside of it. So basically, we're just going to treat our actual query as a string and we'll just write the query inside here. So select all from users should hopefully get all of the information from the users table. Now next, we need to go to our database object DB and have it actually execute that query. Now the way we do that is we can create another variable called query, and this will just represent an object that contains all of the query's results. We go to the DB object and we call the method called query, and we pass it the string SQL. So basically it says go to the database and execute the query SQL, which in this case is select everything from the users table. This is all equivalent to us writing the code in MySQL Workbench and pressing that execute button. Now this query object, it contains all of the information about our query. The number of rows it found, what rows it found, we can access the data within each of the rows and each of the columns. We just need to know exactly what syntax we have to use. Now just to test it, let's see how many results are returned by this query. One way we can do that is we can simply echo the query's number of rows. So basically this goes to the query objects and it accesses the numRows variable. And this is just going to echo it out so we can see how many results were found. Now we know that when we created the users table, we only added in 5 users. So when I run this script, I should see 5 appear. So I'm going to save the file, head back over to Google Chrome, and instead of calling the db.php file, I'm going to go for the testdb.php file. And let's see what happens. Look, we see 5 at the top there. Zoom in, 5. Because that represents the 5 users that we've got stored inside of our users table. Now, the last thing we're going to do in this video is we're going to figure out how we can loop through all of the results that are stored inside of this query object. Remember, this query object should store all of the 5 users that were returned by the above query. Now, one way we can do that is using a for each loop. So the first thing we'll do is we'll declare the for each loop just by writing for each. And we want to loop through each of the results inside of the query object. And the way we'll do that is we'll declare where the results are stored, query, and we'll represent each of those results, each of those rows, as the variable name row. So this for each loop will loop through each of the rows that are stored inside of query, and it'll use the word row, the variable row, as a placeholder. Now what we'll do, just to see how it works, is we'll echo out each of the user's name. The way we can access the user's name from the rows is by using the standard PHP array notation. So we'll go into the row, and if we want to access the name, we do some square brackets, and then we write in the name of the attribute we want to print. So this is going to go into the results row, and that this row variable basically represents the whole row in the database that's returned. So this should contain the email as well as the age range and so on. In this case, we're just accessing the name, and it's going to echo it out for us. So hopefully when we refresh the testdb page, we will see all of the names. But you can see they're all printed out next to each other. If we want to fix that, we simply have to put a BR next to it, a line break. So I'll put a BR at the end, and hopefully we'll see it's a little bit prettier. There you go. If we wanted to access some extra information, for example, if we wanted to print the name followed by the email, then all we'd have to do is we'll put in a space and we will go row, but this time I want the email. So now this is going to print out the user's name followed by their email. There you go. We can access any of the information that was returned by that query. And in this case, we selected all of the columns, so we can access name, email, created, the ID, the age range, anything that's stored within that table. In the next video, we're going to work on how we can incorporate this into the website we've been building. So if we go back, we're going to incorporate it into our website here so that every time we visit the website, it'll log into the database, get the user's information, and then use that to generate this HTML here.